Namaste, friends. Welcome to this session of...
Namaste, everyone. We are back to our session number 2, day 2, week 2. So triple 2. No? So it's going to be a lucky session because the total count of triple 2 is 6. And personally, my date of birth is 6, so I can say that it's a lucky number for me. So Maitreyi ji is here with us. We welcome her, and she will be talking about her topic, which is Hindu polity, Panchayat, Grama, Janapadas, Rashtra, Hindu state, overall Chakravarti Rajya, of a Chakravarti Rajya. Like you have heard, Sri Ram was a Chakravarti Samrat. So how all this system was working, what the system is, and what are the main aspects or parts of this Chakravarti Samrajya system. So Maitreyi ji is here, and Maitreyi ji is, let me introduce her to you. Give me a second. Maitreyi ji is an Indian American who is a physical therapist by profession and a student of Vedic principles and practice by calling. Currently, she is seeking to make Vedic studies accessible to children as a VSS volunteer-teacher. VSS is Vedic Sanskrit school. So VSS volunteer-teacher. She enjoys sharing meditation, yogaasan, and stories with her children. So she is welcome, and please keep taking notes. Be ready to ask questions because completely a new subject. So take notes and ask questions. We would love those question answers. 15 minutes are especially are for question answer session. So I again welcome Maitreyi ji. Please continue. Thank you.
Namaste, Acharya ji. Thank you for your welcome. And namaste to all the friends who have joined here today. And thank you so much, Acharya ji, for giving me this opportunity to join with the Hindu Heritage Foundation. I think I was feeling back at home on the online classes at VSS, which we did throughout last year. So I went ahead and started the meeting right away. I jumped into it. But thank you. As Acharya ji said, I like sharing facts and information about our heritage with my own children. That's how I started, because my parents took me to sammelans and satsangs and meetings, and it was amazing to learn about our interesting, rich culture. I used to devour Marchitra Katha storybooks and Bharati Vidya Bhavan books. I hope all of you have access to these. Of course, you do, because it's internet. So, but the stories from our heritage are so interesting, and that set me up to sharing all this information with you. Even as I grow up, I keep on learning more and more about all these facts and figures and all the amazing accomplishments of our people. So the topic that was given to me, let me share my screen with you, was Hindu polity. Hindu is a word we're all familiar with, I hope. But does any thoughts on what the term polity means? Show of hands, thumbs up, reactions. Anybody familiar with the term polity? Or any thoughts? You can tell me what you think. or we are going to find out anyway, right? Any volunteers? Okay, I understand. It's a very unfamiliar, we don't use this term every day. We think about politics and government and politicians, but we never hear the term polity. So we'll find out more. That's the fun of learning about a totally new subject. So I'll make this simple. This is about our origin. Who are you? Where do you come from? Any answers? How would you answer that question? Pia, I see you raised your hand.
I think like the origin story would be where our ancestors came from. So I don't think it's more like where we live. So my parents, they are from India. They're from Gujarat. So I think if someone asks me where are you from, I would most likely say either from Gujarat or from India, because it's like whenever someone sees like a Hindu face, they're like, where do you come from in India, or where do you come from there? So I think that's what it is.
That is so on the point. Exactly. There's always, it's a loaded question. You never know what the person who's asking the question, what is he trying to find out? What are they trying to find out? Are they trying to ask us where we live? Or the deeper questions like, I'm trying to understand more about you. What are you? How do you think? What are your values? So it's a very loaded, deep question, right? And sometimes we have a decently easy time answering this question because we all have a place to call home. And we know, I usually have started telling people I'm from Chicago, Illinois, right? We know which town we are from, what neighborhood we are from, what state, what country, what planet, right? And our place in the universe. We have a definite self-identity as citizens of this country or another country on this planet. Because over the years, we have organized ourselves into communities, into societies, and into nations. But how old are these nations and societies? Now, if you ask the same question to one of your ancestors from ancient India, what do you think the answer would be? Any volunteers? What do you think an ancient ancestor from India, ancestor of Hindus? Pia again? Yeah.
I think from what I've read about Indian culture, maybe it could have been the Indus Valley.
Could you say it again, dear? I couldn't hear you.
I think it might be the Indus Valley.
You think they might say that they're from the Indus Valley? Okay, that's one familiar answer. Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else? Any answer? You could even type in the chat. I think I can access chat. Okay. Well, but Pia, like Pia said, the most we hear about India is that the civilization in India began 3,000 years ago with the Indus Valley civilization. We don't have anything farther than that in our textbooks. That's what I was surprised by. Maybe not surprised, because 2 years ago, my older child was in 6th grade, and he knew all about, I found out that he knew all about Athens and democracy in Greece and Rome and senators and government, because he was learning all about Greek and Roman civilizations, right? And also from Percy Jackson, but he did not know the basics about the Indian civilizations, that what we had achieved in these affairs of government and science and our society. He didn't know the basics because all our textbooks teach what happened in Greece and Rome, right? And for the longest time, we were told that Hindus did not belong to any nation. They did not have any idea of belonging to a nation or belonging to a society or having a government, having elections, having parliaments. For the longest time, we were told that people of India lived in divided tribes and small villages. There's nothing wrong with being in a small village. There's nothing wrong being in a tribe, right? Or living in a kingdom. We'll see that. But we were told that they were divided and fought amongst themselves. They didn't, and only when the British people came, they taught us how to become a country. The West taught us how to become a nation. Is that true? Really? Civilization? The word civilization they used, the Western European nations, they used to group all the rest of the countries into uncivilized, rude nations in which savages lived, barbarians. They thought we did not have the rule of law, right? But if you look at our own vast literature, we will find out that law is actually the foundation of Indian civilization, right? Because law, dharma moolam idam jagat. Righteousness is the basis of the entire world. That is the belief of the Hindus. I'm happy that you are curious and you are interested in origin stories, I'm pretty sure. So I'm pretty sure you'll enjoy learning about our foundations, right? So the Vedic Dharma, if we begin at our origin starts with Vedas. Vedas are the eternal knowledge, the manual, the rule book, the guidebook from the beginning of our existence, right? So what do Vedas tell about Dharma is what we have been following since the beginning. And that is why our country has the oldest pedigree of any known system of law. This is not what we say. This is what some person called J.D. Maine, John Maine, who was who was a British Advocate General in Madras. He said, India has the oldest pedigree, oldest known system of law and order. How did we arrive there? We arrived there because
it's a social media platform and it's a little
Vedas gave us the foundation of Dharma Moolam Idam Jagat. In the rest of the world and in the modern times, what is the foundation? What does the world revolve around? The world revolves around?
Nice try though, good guess.
What do you think the world revolves around?
Okay.
Money?
Okay, so next on my screen is
Rupaya,
Robert K.
right? I am going to, oh, no, don't unmute, please. Okay, so every aspect of Hindu life is intimately connected to Vedas. And our dharma is so I was saying that Hindu life, every aspect is intimately, you cannot separate Hinduism from the Vedas. All our rules and all our life is governed by the Vedas. And our life is based on dharma, which is prescribed by the Vedas. And what is dharma? Dharma is, the dharma of fire is to burn, right? To be hot and to give light. What is the dharma of water? To be cold and to flow. What is our dharma? To be yourself, to follow your truth, to be true to oneself. That is dharma. So our society was designed to allow every soul to pursue its own calling. You know, the deep voice inside you that tells you to seek something. Some people have this motivation to go learn. Some people have this motivation to go run, exercise, become stronger. Some people have this deep desire to help somebody. If somebody is crying or somebody is in pain, they cannot control themselves. They also start crying. They try to serve others. So those are our deep psychological predispositions, our aptitudes, our skills. So our society designed a system so that everybody could pursue their own dharma. And that was, I know Acharya Harishchandraji explained to you the Varnas and the Ashramas, which were designed to provide this system where every person could grow throughout their lifespan. It was not that a person would become, acquire all the knowledge and the wealth and then could relax the rest of his days. No, you had to have lifelong learning. Shram is work. Ashram is working throughout your lifespan. And that is how the soul grows, it develops in its journey. And that is how you improve yourself and contribute to society. So what kind of a society do you think people who understood the purpose of life, people who understood psychology, people who understood that people are different. Some people like books, some people like weapons, some people like to serve, some people like earning money. There are different kinds of people and they need different kinds of conditions to live. What if our ancestors knew this, they had this knowledge, what kind of a society they would have built? Would they have built a society where everybody is a shepherd, or everybody is a farmer, and then everybody is, or everybody just listens to one person? Or would they have designed systems where there would be politics and governance, and they could maintain law and order so that everybody can flourish, right? So that is what our ancestors did. They used the state, the science of government, to protect the people and to protect dharma. So science of government protects dharma and artha. If there is no government, if there is no law, then everybody, it's a free-for-all. People cannot work in peace. People cannot cooperate with each other. Everybody starts interfering with each other, and that is not going to be any good, right? So how do we know how our people, what kind of governments, what kind of information did they use to develop these governments and politics? What kind of books do you think we can look at? Because this was in the way, way back time. We did not have any historical fossils or pottery shards or inscriptions to tell us about this. This is prehistory and beyond prehistory. We have to depend upon the sources of information that came down to us unbroken from the first rishis to whom the Vedas were revealed right up to us. The Vedas give us the information, and Manusmriti, I know Ami Ganatra-ji covered all these topics in her session about the literature, the vast literature of India. So if you look at Ramayana, Mahabharata, and the later books written by scholars like Chanakya, did anybody hear of Chanakya, who wrote Arthashastra? This was about 300 years before Christian era. He was a very famous and a very interesting biography, life story of Chanakya. If you have the time and inclination, I'd say, learn here. Please go ahead.
I think I've heard of Chanakya before.
Yeah. Do you know any interesting stories about him, or any other facts that you want to share?
No.
He actually helped a young child become an emperor in India, Chandragupta Maurya.
Oh yes, yes, that's the one. Yes.
Yeah.
I watched a serial based on it. I think he helped Porus first, and then he helped Chandragupta Maurya.
He's famous for as the tutor of Chandragupta Maurya. And Chandragupta Maurya went on to found the Mauryan Empire, in which later came Ashoka and all these other emperors. But Chanakya himself, he wrote this book called Arthashastra. And in Arthashastra, he mentions 18 to 19 teachers before him who studied Rajya Dharma, or the science of politics, right? And Dandaniti. So all these masters, so 20 masters before Chanakya. You can imagine how old all these books and all this information and knowledge has been preserved, how long it has been preserved. So let's start at the Vedic era. In the Vedic era, what do you think? What kind of government did we have based on Vedas? Do you think people lived in jungles, villages, tents, palaces, cities? What do you think? Let's vote, because it's a democracy now, right? How many people think people lived in jungles? Here raised her hand. Anybody else? How many people think people lived in villages? Aha. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. How many people lived in, how many of you think people lived in cities? Okay. And how about palaces, tents? Any votes for those here? What do you think, palaces or tents? Or both?
Both.
Both? Diplomatic.
Yeah, because actually, since I watched that serial Chandragupta Maurya, they actually lived in villages, tents, and palaces.
Yes, because there were all different kinds of people, and you are very, very right. So, and did they have schools? Did they have officers and taxes, leaders, entertainment, wars?
They had wars. They didn't exactly have school buildings, but they had schools taught by gurus.
Right, exactly. So gurukuls, right? So we know that there was a lot of variety of activities that they did. And actually here, when you're talking about Chandragupta Maurya, that is not actually the Vedic era. This was long after Mahabharata war ended. And Mahabharata happened in 5000 BC. That's about 7,000 years from now. Yeah, from here, before. So, so that, we are not even talking about the Mauryan era. We are talking about the Vedic era, which was long before the Mahabharata era. Okay? So Mahabharata was towards the end of Vedic period. In the Vedic period, people lived in Janapadas. How do we know this? Because Vedas mention words like Jana, words like Gana, and Vedas mention words like Rashtra or nation, Rajya. Okay, so we'll go over that. But Janapadas are villages. Janapadas are the kingdoms, nations. Okay, some of these nations were ruled by kings. Some of these did not have kings. They had more like our republican presidents. But all the leaders of all the nations were elected. That might come as a surprise, right? They had kings, but the kings were elected. It was not necessary that the king's son or daughter would become the next king. Okay, so Jana itself means nation. It doesn't Jana, the word, sound like genetics and generation? That is because Jana and genetics, they share the same root, Jan, to be born. So all the people who were born from the same ancestors, they belonged to a nation. Examples, Kurus, Anus, Yadus, Bharatas, Panchalas, Videhas, all these people were different janas or ganas, groups, nations. And the places that they lived, the nations that they had, the place where they lived would be called Janapada, and the states were synonymous with the people who lived in that land. What that means is the land of the Kurus would be Kuru Janapad. The Yadus, the land where they lived, would be Yadu Janapad. And every Janapad, every nation had its king. But all of these people, the Kurus, Anus, Yadus, Bharatas, all these ancestors, all these different groups, they together called themselves Aryas. And they definitely did have this identity that they belonged to one nation called the Aryavarta, the land south of Himalayas, right up to the Vindhyas and beyond, and eventually up to the two oceans, between the two oceans, and beyond the Hindu Kush mountains. They call this Aryavarta, the land where the Aryas roamed. And all the people together, the whole people, are called Vishaha. Did you ever hear the word Vishwa for world? Similar to that, Vishaha means the whole people. The Aryas did not think of themselves as just limited to one little land, piece of land. They thought in terms of the universe, the whole world. You'll see that's important. And by the time that you're talking about here, the time of Chanakya, the Janapadas you can see are now called Mahajanapadas. There were about 16 of them left, the older ones, and there were lots of changes over the years. But in the Vedic era, there were many, many Janapadas. And in the Janapadas, the people lived in villages and cities. First, we'll look at the villages. The villages were called Gramas, and the village's head was called Gramani or Gramapati. The word Grama and prayers for the prosperity of villages. There are many prayers for prosperity of villages in the Vedas. And the Gramapati, what were the jobs of the Gramapati? He was like a father to the whole entire village. And in those days, they didn't have cell phones. They couldn't just call the central government and ask them for help if there was a flood or if there was somebody attacked them, dacoits, robbers. The people of the village had to defend themselves right then and there, right? So the Grampati would organize the people, and he would lead them in case they had to fight somebody. And the Grampati had to collect the taxes and send them to the king. And then he was assisted also by many other officials, the magistrate, revenue collector, toll collector, gatekeepers, all these officials. So you can understand, if all these people are mentioned in Manusmriti, which is far, far back in the Vedic era, we think that it came to us at the beginning of creation. That's how old Manusmriti is. If it mentions all these officials, how old our system of government is, right? And all the people in the village, all the respectable householders, people who paid taxes, people who had homes, people who had properties, and they wanted the village to grow, those kind of respectable householders would be part of the village assembly. Like you have town halls, and if you live in a city, you go and attend your town hall meetings or even via Zoom. And in the same way, back in the Vedic era, they had Mahajans, the respectable householders from each village, assembling together, joining together. And in addition, there would be village elders to advise the Grampati. So even the Grampati wouldn't take all his decisions by himself. He would have to listen to the people of the village. And later on, this same system has continued into the Panchayat system, which exists in India even today. What is the Panchayat? A Panchayat, Panch means the Hindi word Panch. Anybody remember Panch? Panch Pandav, Panch, yes, 5. Panchayat is a body of 5 people in each village, right? So those people would get together and make important decisions. They would preside over the whole entire village assembly. They would manage the schools together. They would construct water tanks, rest houses, and they acted as bankers and trustees. They managed the wastelands in the villages, lands that nobody had. And if there were helpless people, orphans, they would protect them. And the most important thing was, if there were any disputes among people, the Panchayat settled them quickly and without a lot of expense. Nowadays, if you have any dispute, you have to go to the courts. And when you go to the courts, you have to pay a lot of money to the lawyers. It's very expensive. Don't get into disputes. Try to stay out of trouble. Why? Because we follow the rules, because courts are extremely expensive and they take a long time. Panchayats were a very efficient, quick way. Everybody obeyed what the Panchayat said, and Panchayats were open and transparent. So if people didn't agree on something, they would just take it to the Panchayat and they would talk in front of the whole village and they would come to an agreement. So Panchayats were very important in the old days. And in Manusmriti, we see that this was how the officers were organized, one on top of the other. So one officer would look after one village. And then over 10 such towns or villages, there would be another officer, lord of 10 towns, Dasha Gramapati. Okay? And then over 20 towns, there would be another officer. Then over 100 towns, Shata Gramapati. Then Sahasra Gramapati, 1,000, and then lord of 10,000. And then on top of all these numbers of villages, there would be a national assembly that would supervise all of these. And then on these assemblies would all work together with the king. So that's how you can see that samitis were extremely important in the Vedic era. Samiti means assembly. Some together, come together and meet. Right? If you have to solve a problem, you have to meet with other people and talk. And all these samitis, the important thing to remember is people were elected to the samitis. They would select the best people. Like you elect your members of parliament, people would be elected based upon their merit to the samitis. And all the people, the whole people, Vishaha, Tvam Visho, Vrunatam, Rajyaya, all the people in the samitis together would elect their king. So even the king was elected. Now, let's go back to this slide here, which talks about Pura Nagara, because I'll come back to the king. But people also lived in cities, and this capital city was called the Pura. Any ideas about a famous Pura? Anybody knows a capital city? Pia?
Delhi, New Delhi.
Delhi, what was one ancient name of Delhi? Occurs in Mahabharata and ends with a Pura.
I don't know.
The capital of Pandavas. Here?
I just know these names from Rajasthan. I know Jaipur,
Yes.
Jodhpur,
Excellent. Jaipur, Udaipur, yes.
and then there's also Jodhpur in Rajasthan.
Excellent here. Yep, there are all cities. Pura means city, and especially capitals of kingdoms. So, and Rajasthan, as we know, has many Rajput kingdoms. So Hastinapura was the capital of Pandavas. So in the cities, the administration was a little different. There were municipalities which were called pauras, and it was not a big difference. The pauras and Janapadas, they combined together and they would conduct business with the government, with the king. So in Ramayana, there is a fascinating episode in Ayodhya Kanda. What happens is, how did the thought of making Rama the Yuvraj, the prince, the next in line to the throne. How did that come about? The Ramayana tells us that the Paura Janapada, the people of the capital city and the villages, the representatives and the Brahmins, they all combined together and went to Dashratha and told him, King Dashratha, please make Rama our Yuvraj. We love him, just make him our Yuvraj. Why? King Dashratha was surprised. He said, but I'm ruling you fine. I follow the law and I don't do any, why do you want Rama to become the Yuvraj, the prince? And then all the people, they discussed with the king. They said, well, you're kind of getting old. And Rama is a prince who knows how the government works, and he cares about people, and he is virtuous. He's the best of Ikshvakus. So let's make him the Yuvraj. That is how the story proceeds. So what does that tell us? That people had a say in, they could go and talk to the king and tell him, hey, this is what we want. And in Mahabharata, the Bhishma tells Yudhishthira, you have to be very careful when you're talking to your people, king, because you just cannot go to the people and ask them, hey, I'm going to increase your taxes, give me your money. No, you have to be very respectful and humble when you talk to your people. And you have to explain to them why you have to increase the taxes, or why do you have to lay new taxes, and what are you going to do with that money? So all these rules were there to make sure that people were protected and this whole country would benefit from government. So the reason I was talking to you about this is that now you understand that the state in the Vedic era consisted of an elected king, elected monarch. Monarch is the rule of one person. But this was an elected monarch, and this monarch was guided by, he was advised by 3 elected councils. How do we know this? There are verses in Rig Veda, mantras in Rig Veda, which explain that there are 3 samitis, sabhas, that guide the king and work along with the people. And those 3 councils were Vidyarya Sabha, Dharmarya Sabha, and Rajarya Sabha. One council would think about teaching, learning, education. One council would think about religious affairs. And one council would think about how to govern the country. And all these great people would come together and advise the king. And the military was completely separate. The king would take care of the military, and he would appoint other officers. The samitis, they were not like the old time, the rallies of today. The political rallies where everybody's shouting or just saying, hey, we love this man and we love this speech and we're going to just shout and yell and scream. No. Samitis were a place where there was civilized and high quality debate and discussion. Nobody could just get up and say whatever they wanted. There were rules. You had to propose a motion, then you would be seated in a particular order, and then you would pass resolutions, you would vote. So these samitis, there were very, very complex rules and procedures to follow. And the mantras, does anybody know the Sangathan Sukta from, if you have been in VSS before? If you do, then you'll recognize this. Samano mantra samitis samani. Samanam manaha sahachittam esham. This is the prayer. What kind of people were the people of Vedic era? They prayed that they had unity. They would have a common policy. Hia, I'm sorry, is your hand raised from before? Or did you have a question? Oh, no.
No, I didn't have a question.
Okay, so maybe have a common policy. Maybe have a common council. That means maybe all think alike. Maybe work for the same goals. If you've ever worked on a team project at school, you know how hard it is, right? When somebody doesn't go along with the rest of others, you all want to do something and one person decides they want to do something completely different. Does that ever happen? Yeah, it's so hard to get along, isn't it? So if you want to get things done, You need to have a common purpose. So those are the kinds of mantras which tell us, and these are from the Vedas, from the beginning. So that is where our culture starts. So the functions of the Samiti, when they work together, they heard from the people and they decide, they would think, oh, this is what the people want, but is that a good thing? And okay, if the people want this and they want this and it is good, how can we give it to them? How can we make sure if they need better roads, if they need more water, if they need less taxes, how can we achieve that? Just like in the parliaments today, right? And the House of Representatives and the Senate, they would take this to the king and they would advise the king, this is the situation and we think this has to be done. Then the king would think about it and the king would figure out a way to get it done, right? So the goal of all the people, the king and the Samitis, was to achieve all-round knowledge, prosperity, education, liberty, and dharma, right? That is how the government protected the people and made sure that society progressed. This we can also understand from the oath that the king took. There was, this is from Mahabharata, and the king, when he is made the king, he says, I am taking this oath, I pledge from with my whole heart, without holding anything back. And I will see to it that the growth of the country, I'll see to the growth of the country, and I'll think of the country as God himself. Whatever law there is here, and whatever is dictated by ethics, and whatever is not opposed to politics, that I will, that's how I will act. I will not act against the law. What does that tell us? That tells us that the king himself was not above law. In some Roman law traditions, it says the king can do whatever he wants. But that was not the case in our Vedic tradition. The Vedic tradition says the leader of the assembly, the leader of the Samiti, the leader of the Samiti is who? The king is the Sabhapati. The leader has to abide by the laws. The law is the true king, right? And we are warned in our books that if a person becomes a dictator, a despotic ruler, who does whatever he wants and is all powerful, then what happens to the people? The people suffer. The people become poor. The king will take whatever he wants from them and he eats them up, right? Because if the king cares only for himself and his happiness and does not think of the people and is just out of control, then he becomes like a predator and the people become his prey. So that is why they took a lot of care that the king was elected based on very specific qualities. The king had to be powerful and the king had to be close to people. Like the people of Ayodhya said, Rama, we love Rama. We want him to be our king. And the king should be so smart that he should be able to understand what motivates people, what they want to do. And the king should be himself knowledgeable, and he should also work to make everybody knowledgeable, right? And he should, if there are any wicked people, criminals, he should burn them like fire. Scary words, right? Keep the wicked under control and keep the treasury always growing and full, right? But the most important thing is when you look at the king, your heart should be glad. Your heart should be happy. Because that is usually the test. You can always tell when somebody is a good person or is going to do harm to you if you listen to your gut instinct, right? But overall, like I said, the true king was the law, the danda. The law maintains order, law protects the people. Even when everybody is sleeping, the law stays awake, right? So that was the way our people were guided. And there was a lot of complex administration. We had titles for commander-in-chief or armed forces, and they knew how to separate the army and the civilians. The army would not control the towns or cities. There would be a civil government, and there would be a minister of justice. And all the assemblies and the officers, the ministers, they would all be very learned and just. And one important thing is they were all required to have self-control and possess a noble character, right? So the assemblies, it was told that they should have 10 members, or at least 3, who are scholars of Vedas, and they should be very high masters of logic, and they should be masters of language. So because when there are complex things that need to be said and new things that need to be taught and express and explain to people, you need to have mastery of language and ideas. And elevated minds, meditation, excellence, these were very highly valued, and those were required in the members of the samitis. So do you think our leaders today, politicians, members of parliament, do we think in the same way about them? Do we expect them to have self-control and to be knowledgeable and have meditation and exercise practices? Are we holding to the same, our ministers and everybody to the same standards? That is why there is another saying in India. It is called Yatha Raja Tatha Praja. That is, as the king does or is, so is the praja, the people. And in democracies, it is the opposite. Just like the people are, their elected representatives will be, right? So that is another interesting thing. The quality of the politicians and the ministers and ambassadors. The ministers and ambassadors were appointed by the king. They had to be natives. They had to be citizens of the nation, and they had to be from good families, because family was very important. Families would determine what kind of values are passed on to the children and to the next generation. So they made sure that people from good families who had lived in the country, who loved the country, and who had invested in the country from ages and generations, those were the people who would be ministers. If you bring an outsider who doesn't care about the country, he'll leave the country tomorrow and say, bye-bye, I'm going to be gone. That is not going to help anybody, right? So the ministers and ambassadors are people who are sent to foreign nations to negotiate treaties. So it was a very complex system. And all these we are still in the Vedic era, which was more than 5,000 years ago. Okay, treasury under the king, peace and war were under the ambassador, and everything was under the control of the assembly or the samitis. And the king and the state would collect taxes. They would make sure that the students and teachers were protected. The schools would disseminate knowledge. They would spread knowledge. And the king and the state would face the enemies of the nation. You need peace to be able to do anything in the other fields. And they also fought wars, but they fought wars with a lot of honor. They would not hurt anybody who was already wounded or in agony. They had very strict rules not to hurt anybody who was unconscious or who was sleeping or whose hair was scattered even and couldn't see properly. And there were rules on how to treat prisoners. You could not ill-treat prisoners. You had to give them food and the necessities of life. You could not insult them or torture them. So these are ancient teachings from our Vedas that are ingrained in us. They are in our culture. Obtain what you don't have, preserve and augment what you do have, spend the augmented wealth for spread of knowledge and protection of the helpless. That was the treasury duty of the king. So whatever there is, the country is lacking in, if the country lacks technology, try to gain technology. If the country lacks weapons, try to gain the weapons. whatever the country needs, you have to work hard. The king has to work hard. The state has to work hard to get those resources and then increase those resources and use them, grow them, and then use them for the benefit of the people and protect the people from dacoits and robbers and the wicked people. So these were such important duties. That is why it was said, Sarva Dharma Param Kshatram in Mahabharata. It means when a king is taking care of so many duties, what does that tell us? That tells us that he is doing a supreme sacrifice. He is giving his all to protect the people. So Kshatriya Dharma was considered the highest among the duties or dharmas. So yeah, there was, like I said, there was a lot of machinery. There were town halls, detectives, pensions, remunerations, all these ideas, and taxes. There were complicated systems for taxes, and they were making sure that the king should not take excessive taxes. They said, like a cow drinks milk from the mommy cow. Oh, give me 1 second, please. I need to recharge real quick. I'll be right back. Okay, so I hope you all enjoyed that little break. The king should take taxes like a little calf takes the milk from its mommy cow, right? Not greedy, a little bit. If you drink too much, then you grow actually, the calf actually grows weaker. Like a bee takes pollen from a flower. That's how carefully you have to take so that the people are not oppressed by excessive taxes. And our books also describe taxes on international trade and trade from seas and oceans. So that tells us that even in the Vedic era, there was a lot of complicated activities going on, which we think of as modern. So, and there was a lot of advice in the Vedas and Manusmriti and Mahabharata about warfare, how the king should fight wars, should make allies, should make peace, can actually use conspiracies to cause division among enemies, right? And use spies, and for justice, how to punish people. And the interesting point about justice system in those days was that higher the social class, more severe would be the punishment. So if an uneducated person would perform a crime and would be fined 1 paisa, the king would be punished for the same crime with a fine of 1,000 paisa. Okay, so the same crime did not mean same punishment. If you knew better, you shouldn't have done it, right? And if the higher people are not punished at a higher severity, then who would stop them? They would not stop, and they would be unstoppable, right? So it was and there were very severe punishments too, bodily punishments, because it was considered that if you punish somebody severely, it would serve as a lesson for the rest of the people. I know a lot of you may not agree with that, but that is the teaching in the Vedas, because it is considered that a punishment at the right time protects the rest of the country from further hardship from bad people, right? If they know that there is strict punishment, like I'm in India right now, nobody obeys the traffic rules because there is no punishment here for not following traffic rules. But in other places, I know that if you break a rule, then you get a ticket, you get a warning or a ticket, and you have to pay hefty fines. You're done. You follow the rules, right? So it depends upon the punishments. So the king and the queen, the judges themselves and their wives, their families, they were not above punishments either. The assembly could punish the kings, and they could actually depose the kings. That is, they could get the king off the throne if the king's committed some crime. So that tells us how the powers were separated and there were checks and balances, like in the constitution today. So overall, the concept was that the state was a trust. The Rashtra, the Rajya was a trust, and the king was the trustee. If the state is a tree, the king is its root, the ministers are its trunk, the subjects are like the flowers. And what is the fruit? The prosperity is the fruit. And the seed is the whole entire country. So they talk about the whole country as a growing, flourishing tree. And the peak of all these achievements is Samrajya. Okay? The combination of monarchies, a super state. It is the ideal, the highest achievement of the political system in Vedic literature. Chakravarti Samrat is the emperor, king of kings. There were lots of people, Rajas, Maharajas, Adhipatis, Mahadhipatis, but the Raja of Rajas is the Chakravarti. The emperor, do you think the emperor would just become an emperor by conquering others? The emperor was also elected. And in a lot of cases, the emperor had to go through a series of rituals. Not in a lot of cases, almost always. The emperor had to go through a series of rituals and demonstrate that he was more powerful than his neighbors and faraway kings. And then the faraway kings would recognize that this person is more powerful than us, and he is the emperor. So the Mahabharata, and in Satyat Prakash, Maharshi Dayananda Saraswati, he gives us a list of emperors, starting from Swayambhu Manu, who was the first king, the first emperor, Chakravarti Samrat, to Janaka and Jarasandha during Mahabharata times. And the last emperor that happened in Aryavarta was Samrat Yudhishthir. In Mahabharata, we hear about Yudhishthir conducting the Rajasuya Yajna and inviting all the kings from different corners of the world. All these kings, there was a king who was invited, his name was Vidalaksha. That means cat-eyed. This king's eyes were like cat's eyes. So what do you think? And a person from India would have cat's eyes usually? Hazel colored, greenish, bluish eyes? No, that would be most probably a European. So European kings. And there was somebody called Bhagadatta who came from China. And Babruvahana, it is said, came from the Americas to the Rajasuya Yajna. And that shows how far the influence of Yudhishthira went. So they traveled far and wide, and India's influence was all over the world. In fact, from the beginning of time to the end of Mahabharata era, India's influence was everywhere. And how do we know this? We still have the evidence for this because the languages all over the world, most of the languages of the world belong to the, what they call now the Proto-Indo-European group. Now, if you take a country, anybody heard about Lithuania? You know, there's a tiny little country called Lithuania, far above, close to Russia. It was occupied by Russia. Lithuania's language, if you hear it spoken, I'm a physical therapist, I said, right? Many people in USA, they come from Lithuania and serve as helpers to the elderly. And when they speak, it sounds like I'm in a village in Punjab. That's the way they speak. Because their language is the oldest living form of Sanskrit still being spoken in any country today. How do you think people in Lithuania have names like Agni and Sunu? And they have Lithuanians, they call the day, what do we call day and night? Din and Rat. In Lithuania, it is Dina. So far away, it is if you fly to Lithuania, it will take more than 5,000 kilometers in those days, how did our influence go so far away? It was not because we conquered them and we went there and stayed there and taught them Sanskrit. It was because of our dharma, our influence. So the whole area over which the power of the Chakravarti Samrat, it ran, the dharma was maintained by the kings from Aryavarta. And this whole area where this wheel of dharma went without obstruction was called the Chakravarti Samraj, right? So that tells you that even in the most ancient days, people had an identity that we all belong to Aryavarta, right? And we all belong to this nation. So there were other things that we could cover. We also had republics where there were people without kings, and many kingdoms later on, when they were not strong kings, they became republics. And there are descriptions of parliaments in Punjab and in near Bihar, Vaishali, which had 7,000 people as members, right? And if anybody tries to tell you that the Western people invented democracy, just tell them, haha, we know better, right? And then types of republics. And how do we know this? We didn't say this. The Greeks, when they came to India, they told us about the types of republics that they saw here. And there are different types of constitutions. There were non-hereditary people. There were king where one person, this word Swarajya, you come across a lot in India. That is, in this, the Raja was considered the leader of equals. That is language found in the Indian constitution too. The leader of equals, the prime minister. And the Vairajya was kingdoms without a king. Not a good idea. Dvarajya, worse, two leaders and in mutual conflict, not a good idea. Arajaka, no king. The laws were just by mutual understanding between people. Do you think that would work great? No laws, people will just expected to get along with each other? Not quite, right? So yeah, those were, like I said, people experimented a lot because we had such a long history to work in, right? And then these are some of the other empires you might hear about. Like I said, this was the Maurya Empire, but these are all after the Vedic era, just in the recent, this is considered ancient history, but this was about 300 years of before Christian era. So you can see how extensive the Mauryan Empire was, from up here, Afghanistan, and beyond Afghanistan into Turkmenistan, into southern India. And then Gupta Empire, this light lavender area, that was the Gupta Empire. And there were other important kings later on, but you can see how the empires became smaller and smaller. But to sum up, an ancient ancestor of Hindus would say, I belong to, what do you think? Would an ancient ancestor of yours, what would he say? Here?
Vedic era.
Vedic Dharma. And what kind of a country or state or nation? Because we're talking about polity, that is form of government or form of state, Rashtra. So do you think an ancient ancestor of Hindus would say, I'm a Gujarati, I'm a Marathi,
No.
What would an ancient Hindu ancestor say? I belong to Aryavarta or Bharatavarsha, Bharatakhanda. If you do pujas at home, in the Sankalpa that you recite before every puja, everybody says, Jambu Dvipe Bharatakhande Bharatavarshe, right? So that, and that tells you, even when the Buddhist Ashokan king, he sent his son to Lanka to teach them about Buddha, that Ashoka's son told the king of Lanka that he came from Jambu Dvipa. Okay, so even in Buddha's times, people had an idea that they belonged to one country, one nation. So overall, today we see how is this going to affect us? How do we know that our Hindu polity is still affecting us? How does it influence us? It gives us a pan-Indian identity. That means across India and even beyond India, we have this universal feeling that we all belong to one race, Manav Jati, and one nation, right? And self-government. We know that the king is not an absolute ruler. The people can make their own decisions and they have a voice in the government. And then civil supremacy. We know of many countries where they tried democracy, but the people could not get along with each other. And the military took over. And every other day, a new military leader will come up and say, hey, Prime Minister, goodbye. You can go home now. We are taking over, right? And people would be at the mercy of the military. It was never like that in India. Indians had always civil supremacy. That is, civilians would take care of civilian matters in the cities. In the normal times, the army would not interfere with the government. The Kshatriyas would take care of the war. The king and the assembly would take care of the civil things. And individual and collective uplift and welfare. So overall, what did we work towards? What did the state work towards? Every individual had freedom of expression, and the whole society would benefit because every person is contributing to it to the best of his or her abilities, right? So does that sound like something that happened in the ancient past, or does that sound like something that was just invented today in the modern days? Because when we see in the serials and movies, we only see kings who are laughing and ha ha ha, and they're carrying weapons and conducting wars. And we think, oh, a king is all powerful. He's almost like God. He's super rich, right? But the picture we have here is completely different. So it is very important that we learn about these topics and that we understand what we are, our origins, right? Because our culture is so rich, it can guide us to become excellent in every area. I hope you are more curious to find out about all these empires and all the amazing emperors and how they influenced and accomplished so much by going through more of this history. So I think we are about at the end of our time, if I'm correct, Acharyaji. Should I ask for questions or?
Yes. If you have something to add to it for a few minutes, you can, but otherwise you can wrap it up.
Yeah, I wanted to also talk about the most recent kings, emperors who tried to understand our ancient heritage and tried to recreate that in the form of the ancient Hindu polity. They tried to implement that. Those were the Marathas. Shivaji Maharaj, in his, there are beautiful stories of how his coronation took place. And the Chhatra Chaya, the umbrella was carried on him as a sign of his becoming an emperor. So Marathas, they successfully created an empire, the most recent Hindu polity model. They were able to recreate what was done in the Vedic era because they studied Shukraniti, a book called Shukraniti, and they founded the council of ministers, like the samitis that were advised in our books. And they had a council of 8 ministers, Ashta Pradhan, right? And they realized that the king cannot be a despot. There cannot be a one-man rule. You have to follow the advice of learned people, experts, and you have to listen to the people and respond to them. So that is why the Marathas were very successful in creating a pan-Indian empire. They went right up to Bengal. And there were other people who attempted, but most of the experiments failed because they forgot about the ancient knowledge from our Vedas and Manusmriti. So Swami Dayananda Saraswati, when he wrote Satyarth Prakash, it created a lot of awareness among the Indians, because these were the times when the British were ruling India, when Maharshi Dayananda Saraswati wrote Satyarth Prakash, and the Indian intellectuals, they had been completely lost in the British rule. They had completely agreed with what the British taught them. They thought they didn't have their own history. They didn't have any accomplishments in from their own ancestors. And we were ignorant of our own heritage. But Maharshi Dayananda Saraswati, he had not been taught in the English method. He had completely learned in the parampara of our rishis. That is parampara is an unbroken chain of knowledge that is passed down from one guru to the other. So Maharshi Dayananda Saraswati gave the original interpretations and spread that knowledge to everybody. So he wrote down, hey, what are you talking about? We had Chakravarti kings in our past. Our influence extended all over the world. So wake up, Indians. You have to understand how amazing your ancestors were and what they could achieve. And why are you under foreign rule now? Because you've forgotten your heritage. You've forgotten your varnas. You've forgotten your ashramas. You've forgotten your duties, dharma. So go ahead, work hard, strive, and have ambitions. And he woke up the people of India. And that is how a lot of revolutionaries, a lot of the leaders of Indian independence movement, they were inspired by reading Satyarth Prakash and the ideology of Maharshi Dayananda Saraswati. Because the concept of Swarajya, people say it was given by Gopal Krishna Gokhale and others, but Maharshi Dayananda Saraswati was the one who gave these mantras from the Vedas and the Manusmriti. He cited them and he said, hey, look here, this is what our scriptures tell us, the importance of Rajya and the importance of Swarajya. We looked at in the slides. So that is the importance of being aware of our roots. So we can, if you are aware of your past, then you can really be inspired and know yourself and know what you're capable of. So that is important to remember. I hope you all learned something new, interesting, and maybe some of you will become leaders, Chakravartis, and definitely be a leader wherever you are, in whatever you do, right? If you do your best effort in whatever station of life you are in, you follow your dharma, that is going to be our achievement, right? Any questions? Anything that was not clear? I don't see any response. Okay, but history is one of my favorite subjects because it is full of interesting stories. And yes, Pia?
I really love the depth that you went to get all this information, and I like history too. So I found this very, very interesting.
Thank you so much, Pia, for the feedback. I'm glad you enjoyed this. And yes, history is our story, right? And if we are able to tell our own story and not allow somebody else to tell us that this is your story, then that is going to be very, very important for our future, right? And so I hope you keep learning the stories and listening and sharing and learn about ourselves. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Maitreyi ji. And
आचार्य
I
जी, अगर
am.
कोई त्रुटियां हो तो मुझे क्षमा करें.
हाँ,
मैंने
बेटा? हाँ,
अगर कोई त्रुटियां हो तो क्षमा करें.
अरे नहीं नहीं, I am proud of you. The next sentence was, I am very proud of you. And I knew कि आपको ये task दूंगी और and you will fulfill this task very well. So you have proved this, and I feel very happy, very glad, very pleased. And I believe, and I am sure this paper, this presentation will be referred many times. People will take notes if they will not refer it, but they will definitely use it as their resource kind of paper. And it will be available on our Facebook page. And thank you so very much again. It's lunchtime now. We will have 1 hour and 45 minutes lunch break from now on. Our next session is, give me 1 second. Our next session is at 3 p.m., 2 p.m. Central Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. It is Hindu Psychology and Control of Mind by Dr. Harish Chandraji. So be on time, join on time. So we will see you. Thank you so very much. Maitreyi ji, there are few messages, reactions in the chat box. Please, you can.
Yes, I see that now. Thank you for attending and being so responsive. Thank you. I appreciate all your messages. Bye.
Yes, very interesting, informative session. Thank you very much.